All right, so we were listening to Philadelphia Mayor Sherelle Parker as she was speaking at this conference involving mayors from across the United States. We did want to play out at least some of her comments right there. I'm Stephanie Quinn. You're watching Live Now from Fox on this Sunday. I did want to share this with you. This is some breaking news out of Lebanon right here, where we can see a lot of activity. This happening just moments ago on the lower left-hand side of your screen. You can actually see what appears to be a fire from an explosion there in Beirut, Lebanon. This comes as Israel continues to trade strikes with Hezbollah there in Beirut. So a look at some video from just moments ago there in Beirut, Lebanon. Meanwhile, this is the live look from that very same spot. You can see that smoke continues to billow there as we are also following additional breaking news. This is from Fox News correspondent Trey Ying saying that a senior Iranian parliament member indicated that Iran will fire on Israel tonight in response to the IDF strikes in Beirut, saying, quote, "We will deliver a decisive and painful response to the Zionist regime's attack." That is according to the spokesman with the National Security Commission. So a little bit more on this as we continue to follow all of these developments. A live look back in Beirut, Lebanon, as Israel has struck Hezbollah targets in Beirut. And I did want to share just a little bit more as Israel struck Beirut's southern suburbs without warning earlier Sunday, days after a ceasefire agreement in Washington went into effect, and despite a U.S. request not to attack Lebanon's capital. Lebanon's state-run national news agency said 2 people were killed and 11 wounded in a preliminary count. Iran had warned that an attack on Beirut would renew full-scale war across the Mideast, even as Pakistan tries to restart talks between Tehran and Washington. Iran wanting a deal to include ending the war in Lebanon. Now, there was no immediate White House comment. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office said the strikes were in retaliation for the Iranian-backed Hezbollah militant group firing at northern Israel earlier, and that the attacks targeted command centers in the urban neighborhoods. Hezbollah did not immediately claim responsibility for those strikes, but all of this comes as fighting continues between Israel and Hezbollah, despite last week's announcement that a U.S.-brokered ceasefire had been extended. Hezbollah rejecting the U.S. broker deal and instead endorsing Iran's demand that ending the war in Lebanon be part of the negotiations with the United States. So a live look there from Beirut. Now, all of this also comes as Pakistan's interior minister was in Tehran earlier today in a fresh bid to restart negotiations between Iran and the U.S. as the U.S. military said it shot down 2 more Iranian drones over the Strait of Hormuz that threatened international maritime traffic. The latest action comes as the U.S. administration presses Iran to make a deal to end the war. The heaviest fighting ended with a preliminary ceasefire on April 8th, but the sides have not been able to agree on a long-term end to the war. So Pakistan's interior ministry in Tehran right now to deliver a message to Iran's supreme leader. That is according to Iranian state-run RNA news agency. To talk more on this, I do want to bring in Michael Makovsky, who is the president and CEO of the Jewish Institute for National Security of America. And Michael, we appreciate you joining us here on Live Now from Fox.
Thanks for having me again, Stephanie.
So I did want to start off with what is happening between Israel and Hezbollah. We have been seeing these strikes continuing to ramp up. And as we just shared, and I did want to put this up for our viewers who are just joining us, the fact that a senior Iranian parliament member said that Iran will fire on Israel tonight in response to the IDF strikes in Beirut. Michael, what can you tell us about the very latest developments in this respect?
Yeah, thank you. Just one historical context point is that this round with between Hezbollah and Israel began very shortly after Israel and the United States began attacking Iran. And evidently, the Iranians asked Hezbollah then to attack Israel, to pressure Israel. Uh, the Hezbollah last summer did not do that during the 12-day war, but this time they have. And the Israelis said, fine, well, I think they maybe were a little overconfident at the beginning, the Israelis, and they kind of welcomed like the opportunity to weaken Hezbollah further. But this has been going on now since March, and then we had the ceasefire, as you said, but Hezbollah uh, rejected it. For the Iranians, I think we have to see it in the Iranian context, because Hezbollah is Iran's main proxy. It's always been its main proxy. It's a proxy that it has the most control over, although it has been severely weakened. It's, I think, their way, it's the Iranian way of pressuring Israel and pressuring the United States, I think, in an agreement. And then we saw what happened last week, where President Trump pushed Israel not to retaliate in Beirut. Why does Beirut matter? Because Beirut, in that particular section of Beirut where you showed the smoke, is where the basically Hezbollah's had its headquarters. Israel wanted to hit back at that headquarters. The Iranian Trump restrained them, but now evidently he's permitting more surgical strikes, and that's why when you see the smoke, well, I think they dropped something like 10 2,000-pound bombs, the Israelis did. It could have been much more, but I think the Israelis are trying to be they're trying to be more surgical and limited in deference to President Trump's request. That's what it seems like.
And Michael, you brought that up. There was quite a fiery exchange between President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu by phone, during which President Trump asked Israel, not to strike Lebanon, talking about those military operations that we continue seeing. Netanyahu and President Trump have always had a very close relationship, especially with what is happening right now with Iran. But is there a rift, perhaps, in terms of the strategy involved with these two countries? What can you share with us about this?
Yeah, I think there's been a rift ever since President Trump declared a ceasefire between Israel and the United States on one side and Iran in early April, I think April 8th, I believe. So that was not what Israel wanted to do. They wanted to continue the attacks on Iran, which the United States has been doing together with Israel since February 28th. I think the view was they needed a couple more weeks. I think the U.S. CENTCOM commander, Admiral Cooper, wanted to have at least a couple more weeks. They felt they had that on their target list. They needed to go through a bunch of more things. So there's been basically a rift since then, with Trump wanting to cut a deal, thinking that a ceasefire would also reduce pressure on the Strait of Hormuz and allow more oil to go through, and this way lower gasoline prices for the American consumer. The Israeli view has been that's a mistake. You reduce your leverage on Iran, and I don't think they really want to cut a deal, the Israelis. So I think you've had a complete divergence. And I'd say what you referenced about last week perfectly illustrates is here the Israelis, they got to hit back at Hezbollah because Hezbollah is firing drones and missiles that are killing Israeli soldiers and hitting Israeli communities in Israel's north. There have been a number of Israelis killed. I think something like 15 Israeli soldiers or so have been killed by Hezbollah since that ceasefire with Iran. So, and Netanyahu is getting criticized from his opposition for being weak and not defending Israel. While also by hitting back Hezbollah, you're going to increase the pressure on Iran for better terms, if you think you're going to get better terms. Well, I think President Trump, he saw the bombing, he thought he was responding to Iranian threats to say, look, if the Israeli attacks on Hezbollah continue, we're going to walk away from talks. So Trump said, no, that's enough. Personally, I think President Trump made a mistake here. He should have been not restraining the Israelis, encouraging the Israelis to really hit Hezbollah hard, because it would only give President Trump more leverage with the Iranians. And what he did in by restraining Israel, I think he's been giving Iran more leverage, just as he did when he started the ceasefire.
Yeah, and you brought up a really critical word, which is leverage. As we take a look at this, and now Iran's stating that part of this deal must incorporate no more strikes in Beirut against Hezbollah. As we take a look at this, and especially as Pakistan is trying to restart these negotiations between the United States and Iran, who has currently more leverage as we take a look at the current state of things? You also talked about what continues to be a focal point, which is the Strait of Hormuz.
Yeah, look, I still think the U.S., to use a phrase of the president's, we still have most of the cards. I think, unfortunately, we've given up leverage. As I said, by starting this ceasefire, the Iranians they see that President Trump wants to cut a deal. He did this ceasefire. The Iranians have been violating the ceasefire. They're hitting energy facilities and airports of our Arab allies in the region, and we just kind of go tit for tat when we should be hitting them back a lot harder, I think. So they see that President Trump has been kind of, I'd say, desperate for a deal. So they think that actually they have the leverage by effectively controlling, not control, but they think effectively having a lot of impact on what flows in and out of the Strait of Hormuz. I think we've given them that false impression. I mean, we've given them that impression by being so eager. So they think they have the leverage, actually. But the fact is, we just kind of have to reassert our leverage. I may add also the look. Gasoline prices obviously have gone up for the average American, which is very unfortunate. The Iranians are losing a lot of energy, a lot of oil revenue by what's going on in the Strait of Hormuz. The difference is that they're a fanatical dictatorial regime, and they don't really care about their people. They only care about the survival of the regime. So they're getting hurt economically, unquestionably, and they want economic relief, unquestionably. But I think what we've seen and what the Iranians perceive is that President Trump is more sensitive to the economic pressure than they are right now. I think we could change that very quickly, though.
And how would you suggest doing that?
Well, one is, I would say I don't really care about a deal. I think instead of talking about a deal's getting really close. President Trump is kind of blown hot and cold on this. I think he should walk away, and he should say, you know what, I don't really care about a deal, and not just say that, but mean it, because I think a deal is bad for the United States because it's going to involve economic relief to this regime. It's going to legitimate the regime. It's going to give them money to survive more, and it's going to demoralize the Iranian people. And we want to invest in the Iranian people and encourage them at some point, not now, but encourage them to rise up against the regime again and hopefully bring it down. So I think a deal is bad. I think we should just walk away. I think we get what we want without a deal, and we get it better. A deal, anyway, the Iranians are going to violate the deal anyway. It's not worth anything. And then I think we should resume military operations for 2 or 3 weeks, or do what we need to do to weaken the regime further, weaken their missile capacity, do what we can on the nuclear within proper risks. And then also, I think we should consider really turning off the lights on this regime, which means maybe hitting more of their internal energy infrastructure, maybe even their facilities. That would really ratchet up the economic pressure on the regime. There are risks to that, including to what the Iranians will do to our Arab allies. We shouldn't minimize those risks at all, but we'll have to do the best we can to protect them.
All right, Michael, as always, we appreciate you joining us here on Live Now from Fox.
Thank you very much, and have a good rest of your Sunday.
And you too.